We are live.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 2021 session of the Annapolis Education Commission. I'm Jeff McCrease. I'm serving as the chair for the commission this academic year. We previously distributed, and it's posted on the mayor's website, an agenda. I'll read through the agenda right now so we all know what we're going to be doing this evening. Item number 1 is a call to order. Number 2, roll call. Number 3 is the approval of prior minutes. Number 4, our invited guest, Ms. Kirsten Clark, the Executive Director of Centro de Ayuda. Number 5, comments and questions and answer for Dr. Joanna Tobin, the school board member here for the Annapolis cluster and surrounding region. Item number 6, committee updates. And that will include a draft resolution from Ms. Laura Booth. Item number 7, old business, 8, new business, and number 9, a motion to dismiss. Is there anything that we need to add to the agenda at the beginning here? All right, if not, we'll proceed to a roll call. Ward 1, Ms. Brianna Griffin.
Hi, Ward 1, Brianna Griffin.
All right, Ward 2 is me, Jeff McCrease. Ward 3, Enid Collison-Lee.
Here.
Ward 4, Kayla Golder. Okay, not yet here. Ward 5, Ms. India Oaks.
Present.
And welcome to India, one of our 2 new members this month. It's great to have you here, India. Ward 6 is not filled. Ward 7, Ms. Laura Booth.
Present.
Okay, Ward 8, Ms. Jess Packler.
Here.
Okay, at large A, Ms. Odessa Ellis. Not yet here. At large B, Ms. Grace Matthews.
Right here.
Great, and Grace, welcome again for the second of our new members here. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you.
At large C, Ms. Janet Norman.
You on mute, Janet.
No, there we go. Yes, thank you. Here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Janet. At large D, Mr. Ken Starks. Okay, not yet here. Alderperson Sheila Finlayson. Not yet here. And our non-sworn member, Ms. Pam Bukowski. Not yet here. Okay, Madam Secretary, according to my notes here, we do have a quorum. Let's proceed then. Previously distributed via email, we distributed our minutes from the February meeting. I'll accept a motion to, is there any discussion, corrections, or additions to the minutes?
I didn't read.
Okay, noting none, I'll accept a motion to approve them as published.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your hand, please. Okay, any opposed? Okay, the motion passes and the minutes are approved as published. So we're on to item number 4, and that's an open discussion with Ms. Kirsten Clark, the Executive Director of Centro de Ayuda, which is one of our chief advocacy groups for the growing Hispanic community here in the Annapolis area. Kirsten, we're very honored to have you here tonight, and we turn the floor over to you. So please speak for as long as you want, and I'm sure there will be following discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am happy to be here this evening. As Jeff was so kind to introduce me, I am Kirsten Clark, Executive Director at Center of Help, or you may also know us as Centro de Ayuda. And we work with the immigrant community primarily in Annapolis, but we also serve the surrounding county and even out of county some. So I was asked to speak for about 10 minutes about education issues. We probably could spend the whole 2 hours this evening discussing issues that are specifically facing the Hispanic community. I'm going to touch on a few. I'm not sure that any of these will come as a surprise to any of you all at this point on, but I'd be happy to answer any questions as well as get deeper into discussion as we go on. So of course, one of the issues that we have seen since the beginning of the pandemic is the issue of access to devices and the digital divide, as we often call it. Of course, this has improved over the last year since the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of initiatives have taken place, but we do still see a lot of youth continuing to have issues with connectivity, and whether that's the quality of internet or consistency. Some families who may be able to pay the internet bill 1 month and then not the next, and have to figure out how to bridge that gap when it comes. And one of the unique issues that we have seen offering out of school programming is even when the children are offered devices from the schools to access all of the school programming, in order to access out of school programming, like from nonprofits like the Center of Health, they need to have an alternative device because the schools devices are limited to access only the school's calls and things like that, of course, for the children's safety, but it does create an additional barrier when trying to access programming to support the youth during this time. So we have been lucky enough to offer some devices to the youth in our programs through grants. But of course, those who are trying to access through other programs or things like that have seen issues. I actually just had the health department call me last week saying, we're doing Strengthening Families. How can they get on our Zoom calls from their school laptops? How did you all do it? And we're like, they can't. The Chromebooks can't access Zoom calls for those types of programs. So when we did that program, we had several devices that we gave out, families on their phones and things like that, in order to access those programs. The next category I was looking at was the home environment. An issue that's come to light for, I think, a lot of people during this pandemic in terms of what the challenges faced by the Hispanic community is housing, and that there are often multiple families living in a unit that was designed for one family, and this can cause interruptions in their education, and they really just don't have the space and privacy that a lot of their peers do during their class time. So one of the comments that we hear very often from our middle school students who participate in our youth outreach program is that they don't like to keep their cameras on because there's a lot of people walking around in the background because they share their bedroom, and there's no way for them to have that privacy. So we try to do the best that we can to keep them comfortable, but also recognize that they're engaging. And we have kind of mixed reports as to how teachers respond to that. Some teachers are stricter than others when it comes to having their cameras on, which of course I understand. We want to make sure that the students are engaged. But it does cause an additional stressor there that may be different from their peers. We have also seen a lot of children that are caring for their younger siblings. With family members who are working in the service industry. Some of their parents never stopped working. So we've had, middle school, high school children who are trying to balance caring for the younger ones along with their own classes, and some even younger, some toddlers or babies. The parents have limited hours and can no longer afford childcare, and the older children are home, so they make the decision to leave the children there, and they're caring for them, which also can have a lot of emotional pressure on some of the older youth if they're caring for a young one. But of course, the parents are doing their best with what's at their fingertips. Additionally, families who don't have a lot of children, we see a lot of children who are home alone. And of course, the mental health issues that surround that. Within the immigrant community, we do still see a lot of stigma when it comes to seeking help with mental health, which also means there is a difficulty with recognizing it. So a lot of parents, when there's a stigma against them seeking help, but when it comes to their children, they are less likely to push back against the help because they want the best for their kids. So if somebody points it out to them, they may be willing to. But if the youth aren't in school, there's less people who are able to recognize that and bring it to their attention. So we have seen actually several cases where our teachers or the tutors that are working with the students in our programs, which there's about 67 of them right now, are noticing things and bringing it to the parents' attention that way. And then once the issue is acknowledged in terms of mental health, we see access issues. There are still very, very few bilingual mental health professionals in the county. I can count them on one hand and name by name because there's so few, and it's really important to have them bilingual. We have some that are monolingual in Spanish or that use language lines, but of course it creates another barrier to that trust and that relationship building and may not have the same success as bilingual therapists. We also see a lot of youth who their primary language is now English, while the parents are still Spanish. So the therapist being able to navigate both languages is really important. And that's not touching on the issue with health insurance. So this is an issue that's pretty unique to the Hispanic community, that there's a large amount of people who are not eligible for health insurance through the state nor through their employers. So they have to go through alternate channels. There are programs and organizations that exist and are trying to fill in that gap. Arundel Lodge has done a lot of work on this, and they use a sliding scale, but again, they have one bilingual therapist, and there are thousands of Hispanic people in the city who could be benefiting from those services. And of course, one of the things that we see, similar to the conversation that we had about representation on this commission, is it's not that the organizations and the mental health agencies are not seeking bilingual candidates, but it's also that there aren't that many in the area. So even when they're seeking them out, they're hard to find. There's big delays, or it's really competitive to try to hire. Moving on to a few other things. Another issue that you may come to mind when talking about Hispanic students is homework and the ability of the parents to support the education, which of course has been exacerbated this past year because I'm sure most, if not all of you, are parents and have had to support your children's education this year more so than in the past, with a lot of parents who are monolingual Spanish speakers. They're not able to help because of the language barrier. And then in addition to that, a lot of the community that we see within Annapolis comes from Central America. And a lot of the parents have low education levels. So even within Spanish, they may not have some of the literacy skills. So even when homework or assignments are translated into Spanish, they may not be able to read them or make those decisions based off of that reading to assist the children moving forward. And we have received many calls at the center of parents crying for the youth who also still are not English speakers, so the English language learners. And so the parent and the youth are, sitting in front of the computer trying to figure out what is going on in the classroom, and they're just lost. Of course, it was much more difficult last year. We've seen big changes this year with the school system and are happy that the bilingual facilitators, I don't even know how many hours they work. They're amazing. But of course, there's maximum one of them per school. Most of them work with multiple schools. So they're one person who's trying to serve hundreds of families, and sometimes they can't get to all of the needs in one day. So we also try to do the best we can. But again, the language barrier is just vast. We don't have enough bilingual people working in any of our sectors really to meet the fast growing population. So I think that's one of the big causes of the struggles across the board. So not just within education, but also in social services and the mental health fields and the health fields. The language, everyone recognizes that they need to have everything accessible, and not just in Spanish, but also other languages for our other immigrant communities. But the gap between recognizing it and making it happen takes time. And each day, basically, that the time takes to hire and make those changes, there's more people who are falling behind. We also, in expanding on that issue of language at the beginning of the pandemic, and we continue to see it at some points, there's often a delay in the materials that come out. So even when we are translating materials, they'll be pushed out in Spanish and English first, and then they'll be translated and they'll push out later in Spanish. And so our families are finding out about key information later. And some of that is the language, and then there's also where they're finding the information. We at the Center of help our clients make email addresses every day. And often they come back into the center and they say that they don't have an email because they don't use it. It's not a common form of communication. And of course, we know within the English-speaking communities, it is a really common form of communication, particularly for important information like updates from school. And so that's another barrier that makes the information take longer, because they're often waiting until they get it through text, and Facebook are typically the two platforms that we see the most often that are the immigrant population is requesting in terms of how the information gets disseminated. And so those are just some basic things that I wanted to touch on, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Well, Kirsten, I think you're right. You got more than 2 hours of stuff for us to talk about, but let's see where the next 20 minutes or so takes us here. So please raise your hand or use the raise hand function. Janet, I think I saw you first, and then Jess.
Sure. Yes, thank you so much for coming here, Kirsten. I'm the Annapolis High PTSA president, so I'll make sure I send you my contact information and how to get in touch with us. If you can tell your families, we do have a thriving Annapolis High School PTSA Facebook page. That's the full name of it. We've got over 900 people, and it's nice that it's the members can pose questions. They can post questions. It's not just a page where we push out information. They can ask and say, my student's starting tomorrow. We lost the school map. Can you help me? And so that we're more comfortable. So encourage them to use that. I would, but if you can think of any things that would help us help our students better, I know Jess Packler is amazing at getting all the materials translated into Spanish for Annapolis Middle School and Eastport. We try, when we can. We haven't received a lot of support. I'll have to find out more from the school system if we can get more support to get our materials translated. But have you been noticing, I noticed with my English speaking student that it's very hard for parents to know how their students are doing because everything is behind a portal that the kids control. You can't, it's very difficult when everything's behind a Google portal, or signing up for things is behind a complicated website that you have to develop more, login and user IDs for. I want to point that out as a barrier I see
Mhm.
all of our families. I'm a bureaucratic whiz, and it's so difficult to accomplish all these things behind so many different portals to know how your student is doing. And
Most definitely.
they're teenagers, and so they all need to be pushed regardless of any background or income or anything.
Yeah.
So if we can make that need known, that if the school system can do less things behind portals. Do you know how many of your families are hooked up to Parent Connect and the Power School thing app on their phones?
Very few of them. So the families that we work with, we try to sit down and connect them with it, but often they don't. Even once we set it up with them, they won't return to the app to check it. They'll just call our youth program staff and say, how's the kid doing? To ask them to check. And so it is we've had a lot of parents say like they missed the paper report cards and progress reports coming home so that they could make sure that they were on task. And we have seen a lot of the youth that are in our programs, when we do go back and check, the work that they said was going to be turned in is not turned in, and all of those fun things that happen with all students, as you mentioned. But being in the loop and access to the portal is definitely another important issue.
Okay, well, I'll let others speak, but if I'll follow up with you on anything you think we can assist with at the high school level, when suddenly grades matter for their post-high school careers. Thank you.
Jess Peckler.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm the Ward 8 member, and so we have a large Spanish-speaking community in my ward, and then I'm also the PTA president at both Annapolis Middle School and Eastport Elementary, so we also have a lot of English language learners and monolingual families, and this is has always been one of my really big interests. I am somewhat bilingual, and so I spend a lot of time with my Spanish-speaking families and trying to help them through the process. And I want to make sure Joanna's on here tonight, and I think this is really important for her to hear, because I think that for a long time we have not had a board member for the cluster, and obviously we have, I think, the largest concentration, not that there aren't Spanish-speaking families everywhere in the county, but we certainly have the largest cluster, and I think that largest number in our cluster. And I think that these issues that you touched on and that Janet touched on are really important. I know that with my families, accessing the parent portal and getting your grades and getting your interim reports and getting the letter that tells you whether or not you're going back to hybrid and when you're going on hybrid is hard when you are a tech savvy English speaker who has email address that she uses all the time. That's me. When you don't have an email address at all, you can't access any of that. You cannot access the parent portal. And this is something that we've brought up to the school system multiple times. I mean, I can't even say how many times we've brought it up, and nothing has been done. And it's a huge gap, right? Like, we're just saying, sorry, you don't have an email address, we can't help you. And I think another big issue that I've brought up multiple times to the school system is that everything is sent in PDF format. And most of my families at Eastport and Annapolis, particularly my English language learner families, when they get something as a PDF, they can't open it. Either their phones don't have access to a PDF app, or they get it and they can't read it. As you pointed out, there's, the literacy levels is a big issue. But, if something comes as a web page, there are a lot of different apps that can read off a web page, just basic things that you have on your phone that can read off something, translate it and read it off. When it comes as a PDF, that's not a possibility. And it's a huge barrier to connection. It's a huge barrier to learning. And so if you all have ideas on how we can work on that and how I can help you work on that, I would love to do that, because I would like to be able to better connect with my families, and I want my families to be able to better connect with the education. I will say I'm a mom of 4 kids, one of whom is in first grade and has to sit in my office with me and have his speaker on all day long so that I can make sure he's not watching PBS Kids instead of going to class. And so I hear what's going on in the classroom. And it is truly amazing. I wish everyone would have the opportunity to sit and see what it's like to be in a first grade class where you have a student who came in the beginning of the year speaking absolutely no English. Their family had moved here 2 weeks before school started, and they are now interacting and learning. You know, the parents still don't speak English, but the student has learned so much in the last 5 or 6 months, however long it's been since the beginning of school. And it's really amazing. And everything that Centro de Ayuda does is really fantastic. But certainly we have such a need in our schools for more bilingual translation, more front office staff that's bilingual. I know that's a big issue in a lot of our schools when we don't have any front office staff. So somebody calls because they need some help and they can't get even through the first part of the barrier, right? They can't get through that first part. So I just, whatever we can do to help improve the experience for our very large English language learner, monolingual, Spanish speaking population, I am happy to help with, because there really are so many barriers, and it really seems like so many of them aren't hard things to get fixed, right? They aren't. It's really just choosing what technology we want to use. It's just choosing how we choose to communicate with our families and choosing the communication method that is more inclusive rather than less inclusive. Choosing communication methods that reach out to everybody rather than just those people who have the resources and technology. And, I know that for a lot of our families, when we were talking about internet access, and, we'll just get Comcast, the low cost Comcast program. But a lot of our families, aren't able to set up accounts, or they live in multifamily homes and the landlords don't want them to have internet brought into their homes for whatever reason. There's just so many barriers to that. Other school systems, Montgomery County, the day it started, they started handing out Wi-Fi hotspots to any family that needed. And that did an amazing job of getting the kids who needed to be online. And I'm not sure why a year into this, we aren't doing a better job of getting hotspots, and why we're just putting it on Comcast's back, because that's not really helping a lot of our families, especially because they're.
Yes, do you have a question directed toward Kirsten?
So I just wanted to put out there, if there's anything in particular that you are doing or that you need our help on, please let us know. And just thank you for everything that you're doing, and know that we're here to support, because it's really important for our schools and our families. And I'd love to talk to you offline. I'll reach out to you offline individually. Oh, one thing I would say is, if you can give us ideas of what we can advocate for, that's what I think we could really use. I know one thing that we've been advocating for is having the school system provide some more as a newsletter, because it's an instantly translated newsletter that can come through text messages. But if you have things that you need us to advocate for, is there anything that you would like us to advocate for, I guess?
Other comments or questions for Kirsten Clark, the Director of Centro de Ayuda, Center of Help? India, please.
I had 2 questions, but the first one was, going back to the translation issue, what kinds of barriers do you see from the school system, since under federal law they are required to translate into any language when needed?
Yeah, I would say part one is recognizing when it's needed. Some families may not have had the connection with the school system beforehand, and may not know how to reach out and ask to have those conversations, or maybe in fear of reaching out. And then the second big one that we see, actually I would say 2 big things that we see are, one, which is the translations being translated automatically and not being able to understand. So we see that a lot with the automatic Google Translate on web pages. Sometimes they're even inaccurate and giving false information on accident. And number 2 is what I mentioned previously, the literacy levels. So a lot of parents, even when they're receiving the material in Spanish, they may not be understanding really what's the root of the information. So thankfully, Spanish is what is the word? I can't think of it. I totally lost the word.
You're talking about phonetic?
Phonetic,
It's
that's
phonetic,
the word.
yeah.
It's completely phonetic. So even those who may not have a high reading level can often read through it, but we find that the reading comprehension is difficult. And a lot of the parents who may have only been to 3rd or 4th grade, when they're given a flyer with a large amount of text or a PDF with a large amount of text, they get so overwhelmed with the reading comprehension that they cannot do it. And I also wanted to loop back to the email issue, something that we saw even long before the pandemic. Often the emails that the school uses are the ones that are put on the emergency cards or are given out at the beginning of the school year. And we had so many families that the school has reached out after by phone and everything else and found out that the emails had been being sent either to the child or to a false email address for I don't know how long. So that's also something that we probably continue to see during the pandemic. And if they don't bounce back, then the school system isn't even aware that the parents aren't receiving those messages.
Plus, there are hundreds of dialects in Central America, so not all Spanish is the same for immigrants. My other question was, how many of the kids you interact with have stayed virtual, and what are the reasons why?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We go over this a lot with our staff, actually, because every country and even within the countries, there's a lot of dialects. So again, that level of misunderstanding can be really high. I myself lived in Colombia, and I find myself accidentally miscommunicating with our clients all of the time just because of specific words or phrases that they don't use. So dialects are really important to keep in mind as well. And what was the second question? Sorry. Oh, about going virtual versus hybrid. Actually, we've seen the majority of the clients and the students that we work with have chosen not to go hybrid because of fear. We didn't expect that. We expected a lot of them to feel like the students would be more comfortable going back into the classroom. But I think because of the really high contagion rate for the last year among the Hispanic communities, they just don't feel that it's worth it. And vaccines are also another topic that there's a lot of fear around. But we have seen a lot of families who want the vaccines, but they also know that the children aren't going to be able to get them anytime soon. So that fear of the child. And then, of course, additional fear if the child doesn't get sick, but they bring something home, and then the parent has to not work and maybe at risk of losing employment because they may not have or be aware of some of the protections of their employment.
Other questions or comments for Kirsten Clark?
Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Odessa.
Oh,
please.
okay. Hi, Kirsten.
Hello.
My name is Odessa Ellis, and I work as a substitute teacher at a high school, and I have a lot of engagement with the Hispanic population, and I noticed children of color anyway are really having a hard time. It's really impacting the children of color. So when you say that they chose to stay virtual, a report came out stating that that's what they want to do, that they want to be virtual, that they don't want hybrid. My question is do you have numbers? Because by them being home virtual, there's not that much interaction, I think, with the teachers and with the, within the classes. And how are they doing? I mean, do you have numbers stating that a certain percentage is not doing well, or I mean, do you have any numbers, I guess, as far as the achievement of the Hispanic population?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any numbers at my hands right now. I can definitely try to get some and loop you guys into that. But I will say one of the things that we've seen, and as you mentioned, it's a lot of these issues that I mentioned are common among all groups of children of color, not just the Hispanic population. But we see the kind of the parents juggling their priorities and the fear that they have of the safety and the health of their family with the fear that their children are falling behind in school and having to kind of make decisions based off of which one of those they feel is more important. And of course, we parents are very stressed. I'm sure all of you can relate. That having to make those decisions. I am thankful that I had to decide that because I don't have children, but we have to decide that for our staff as well and the children at the center. And so we're working on a hybrid model with our youth programs as well. Some of the activities are on site and some are not. But like I mentioned, it's really a juggle of priorities for the parents. And I just think that because they've seen so many traumatic things happen and they haven't felt that the community has cared for people of color in the past year, that there's a lack of trust that if they send them back, that they'll be taken care of.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Last call for Ms. Kirsten Clark. Sheila, please, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, thank you, Jeff, and welcome, Kristen. I don't have a question. First of all, I wanted to apologize. I have another meeting that precedes this one, so I'm always leaving one early and a little late to the next one, so I apologize. But I just wanted to say thank you for being with us, and I'm sure that we'll be hearing a lot more from you as we begin our budget process. So I look forward to your presentation to the full City Council. So just thank you for being here.
It's good to see you again.
Laura.
I just had a question. I know I find navigating like Google Classroom pretty challenging. But I don't know what it's like to access that. It seems it's very, everything is in whatever language, I guess, the teacher is putting things in. So how are the students managing to navigate Google Classroom? If, I know like I personally was having a hard time in the beginning finding things, helping my daughter to find things. So what is that like? And is that a barrier that Anne Arundel County could address?
Yeah, I would say for the students who were in the Anne Arundel County school system before the pandemic, a lot of them were already familiar with Google Classroom, so they navigate it better than we do, thankfully. But for the students who are new, so the kindergartners or the recent arrivals, the families are so overwhelmed because the student can't figure it out, the parent can't figure it out. And I think usually what happens is the bilingual facilitator is sitting down with them on a phone call trying to help them navigate it. But I hope since things are in a hybrid model that some of those families who may be having those really challenging issues would be able to sit down with somebody in person to navigate them, especially teaching particularly the child, because a lot of times the parent may be around when they're first learning and then they're not moving forward. And so that's what comes to mind for me. I'd like to say that there's a quick fix, but I don't think there is in this case in terms of those platforms. They're difficult, and we have had some workshops. I know Laura Gutierrez with the city has also held some basic computer literacy workshops in the parking lots of schools to help parents on site to learn how to get into the devices, open the emails, open Google Classroom, things like that. And those kinds of initiatives make a big difference to the families.
Is that something that we should be doing more of, or is that, I guess Joanna's got her hand up, but is that something that Anne Arundel County could take on? Because I do think that, along with the Power School, those portals, if you can't get through the navigation just to get in there, it's like you walking up to a door and the door is locked and you just can't get through. It doesn't matter how great the information is on the side of that door. If you can't get through it, you're lost.
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal system, what we would like to see happen is the either or. So the parents who want to take the time to sit down and learn the portal have a way to do that, whether it's workshops or one-on-one, and they're able to sit down with someone. And then the parents who just find it too overwhelming also have the option to receive alternatives. So whether that's text messages in paper when possible.
Our Board of Education member, Joanna Tobin, please.
Hi, Kirsten. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we haven't met yet. I've been hoping to reach out to you, so I'd love to talk to you further. Much of what you've discussed, we're aware of, though I didn't fully understand the extent to which there was a problem with Chromebooks being able to be used for any after-school activities. So that I'm very glad. I mean, I'm not glad it's happening, but I'm glad to hear about it. And I'll take this back. I do think broadly with the technology, we, threw everything into this to get moving in the virtual world. It's pretty clear some of the technology obviously is here to stay. And I think we have a good opportunity now to figure out, I mean, as Jess said, these are issues that have been going on for a long time. But as everybody had to be on technology, I think it's revealed it more fully. And so I think this is a crucial time, and I will certainly be taking this back as things. And I think, the broader issue, and this has been discussed in a number of fora before, is that we need to understand fully, this is a big, diverse county. This is a very diverse district, and the assumption can't be that everybody's coming at this from the same position. And so we have to open up all the different routes as best we can. I will say this, and I think this is my own view, is this is a failing in this country broadly. Hiring bilingual staff is really hard. It shouldn't be, and it speaks volumes about what we don't do and don't teach in foreign language in this country. So, that's a sort of foundational educational issue. I personally am interested down the line in seeing if we can have a fully bilingual immersion school. And the big barrier is making sure we can staff such a school. So, those are sort of bigger issues. I had one other question for you, which is in conversations with a couple of other folks involved with Center of Help, it was my understanding you were looking into or trying to work towards bringing a Judy Center to Annapolis. Is that still ongoing? Because I think that would be a great resource.
We haven't actively been pursuing it recently, but definitely still in the back of our minds.
Yeah, I
moving forward.
Yeah, it's a big list, but I think it would be a huge asset. So, all right, well, thank you, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Then mentioning the bilingual education issue, one of the reasons that we see that it's also hard to hire bilingual staff is because a lot of the heritage speakers lose their Spanish.
Yes.
And so then they become adults and they want to get jobs in bilingual settings, but because they do not have the dual literacy skills, they can't actually get positions where they're utilizing that Spanish, or they don't have the professional level necessary. At the center, actually, we have an easier time finding people like myself who learned Spanish than we do people who were born in the US or came here when they were young and still have those bilingual skills.
Yep.
Okay, Jess, you got the last question here, please.
Thanks. I have two questions. One, I wanted to know when you've brought up these am I still muted? No, okay. just took a while to go away. When you brought up, have you brought up some of these technology access concerns to the school system? And if so, what has been their response? And then in terms of the bilingual, the lack of bilingual speakers issue, one of the things that we have talked about a little bit here and in other places has been offering training in Spanish speaking to already hired staff, right? So for example, Annapolis Middle doesn't have a bilingual, they don't have anyone in the front office that's bilingual, and they're not hiring right now because staffing is full. But, you know, is that something that you think might be a possibility? And if so, is that something that might help? So those are the two questions that I have.
I mean, I think that having the basic language skills in whether it's Spanish or in other areas, other second languages, is beneficial. It definitely helps the families feel more comfortable coming in if they know that at the very least, when they come in, somebody will be able to direct them to someone comfortably, who will be able to then sit down and have a conversation. But I don't think that it solves the greater issue. I think that it would take, I mean, me personally, it took me about 6 years to develop fluency in Spanish. So I think if it takes us 6 years to get, you know, comfortably bilingual staff in the offices, then it's too late. Truthfully, I think that again, it's a greater issue that we have to keep in mind, but it's also, you know, thinking of education and the way that foreign languages are treated, and the students who are English language learners are encouraged to speak English only, are things to keep in mind when we're talking about these issues, because that's really where the problem will be solved. I always say that the teenagers and the young adults who grew up in their communities, in their homes, speaking Spanish and learned English at school and preserved those two languages are the future. They will be the leaders. We are working on leadership development programs to help support them and get them into conversations like this. But we, like I said, we see so many of them who are not comfortable speaking Spanish. And part of that is because the school systems don't support them in preserving that language while they're going through the school system. And then again, if we were able to address that part of the issue, we may have more people entering college and the workplace who have both languages, as well as people who learn the second language in school.
Well, Kirsten, Laura, I'm sorry, we do need to cut it off right here. Kirsten, clearly there's an enormous amount of interest in these issues, and we'll continue to extend invitations to you or representative. And for members of the commission, I've been engaged in a conversation with Kirsten about potential nominations to join the board, either as a sworn member or an unsworn member to join the Education Commission. And we truly want to get a conduit going so we can respond better and pass the needs of the community that you're advocating for up to the decision makers. So again, on behalf of the commission, thanks again. You're welcome to stay if you like, or if you need to go and do those important things you need to do, then please feel free to drop out at this point. But thanks again.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I do have to run, but I probably will listen in tomorrow to the recording of your conversation to see what I missed. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks very much, Kirsten. Okay, next on the agenda here is item number 5, and that's comments and questions and answers for and from Dr. Joanna Tobin, our school board member. Joanna, thanks for joining us here as you normally do. The floor is yours.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Actually, something that I meant to say when Kirsten was on, those of you who are following the budget discussions at the board, we did vote to add more bilingual facilitators because we recognize we've got a long way to go to get to what we really need, but we also understand that we need to make as many additions as we can. A couple of highlights from our last board meeting last week, which many of you may have actually seen because it ended at about 9:30 at night, which is sort of unheard of. But I would say sort of the three biggest things we received, our CAC does incredible research for us. And they presented us with a pretty extensive report on developing a student wellness lens, which is aimed at producing, similarly to the equity work we're doing and the work through an equity lens, that when we develop policy, budgets, everything, we have something akin to, in legislation, there's always a fiscal note, right? That says, here's what the fiscal impact will be. Well, we're trying to make sure that we develop an equity lens so that we can have sort of an equity note, recognizing the impact, the equity impact on any policy or budget decisions we make. Similarly, with a wellness lens, we're looking at that because certainly always been my view that first you meet the needs of the child, the developmental and health and wellness needs of the child. And from that, then the academic growth can come, not the other way around. And so that was some significant work that they did and presented to us, which now we need to take the baton and start working with. We also received a very extensive report. It was about 85 pages from the committee that was formed around investigating changing whether or not the name of the George Fox Middle School should be changed. This was a committee chaired by Anthony Spencer, previously on the vice president of the Board of Education, and Janice Hayes Williams was on it, a number of other folks, Alderwoman Pindell Charles, and various other people were on it. And they presented that report. There are quite a few personal testimonials in that report, much of which at this juncture is not for public dissemination. These are painful and difficult experiences that people went through, in some cases, as very young children. But it is my hope at some point it will be available to everyone. It was a powerful history lesson, and the board voted 8-0 to support the recommendation of the committee that the name of the George Fox Middle School should be changed in light of George Fox. And for those who may not know, he was first superintendent of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. He was a supporter of Jim Crow. He made a number of statements, probably the most infamous of which is, I'm paraphrasing here, that my best Black teacher is worse than any white teacher, or something along those lines, because in a case that was brought against the Anne Arundel County Public Schools with regard to the pay differentials and so forth, and was the lawyer who brought that case was Thurgood Marshall. And so there's a lot of history here, but in any case, we did vote 8-0 to change the name. That now is turned over to we have a set of policies for that process, and there will be a lot of community engagement around the decision of what the name will be. The other thing we did was we voted also 8-0 to authorize a contract with the Prismatic Group, which did the consulting work examining our transportation department. You may recall that the board voted to begin the process of changing school start times to times that align with what the health professionals have been telling us for a long time, again, in line with our wellness lens. But there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of money we haven't spent on transportation this year that we have. So there was an opportunity to hire, this was the recommendation of the superintendent, to hire the consultants who had originally said, as those of you who've seen the report, in the original report, that we can change these times if we, and do it at virtually no cost by bringing about the efficiencies that we need to bring in our tiering system, our routing system for our bus routes and so on. So that will begin. So that was, in my view, very good news. Just recently, just today, we gave the SATs to 3,100 juniors. And in January, we gave the PSATs administered to 2,700 juniors. I believe we're ahead of any other county in this respect, in keeping up with some sort of normal kind of administration of these exams. So that is good news. Our cases are pretty much, in terms of in the schools, those of you, depending on what school you're in, have been getting notes if there's a case in your staff or students in a school. Frankly, they've been quite low in the Annapolis cluster relative to other clusters, as I've been seeing. But none of our cases based on contact tracing have been have come about through school spread. They've all been things that have come into the school. And they're slightly up this week from last week, but they're up exactly in lockstep with the community numbers, which is what Dr. Kanyaraman said to us, that schools are not the source of spread, they reflect spread in the community. So if community case rates go up, we can expect to see cases in schools go up. If community cases go down, we can expect to see school cases go down. So that's where we are with that. So I think that's a bit of a roundup of where we are. So I'm happy to take questions. Janet, I see your hand.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tobin. So I have a little feedback. If anybody else can turn off their mic. I have a question for you, why the school system is being more stringent than the health department in their quarantine period. So yes, perhaps our school has not generated cases yet, but some of the private schools that are in session are generating cases and affecting our kids. So my son was exposed outside playing a game, and then had to do went through the series of negative tests, and was cleared by the health department, but was not cleared by AACPS to return to any outdoor activity. He's not in hybrid, to return to outdoor soccer practice until a full 14 days had elapsed from his thing, although the health department had cleared him by negative tests at 7 days. So why, and what my concern about that is that, and so then other members of the soccer team had this happen through family members. My concern is that it's going to drive reporting of family incidents down. So if you say, well, my aunt is or my mother or somebody is testing positive, kids are not going to report it if they know that they are completely eliminated.
Yeah.
Rather than by test results and having negative testing. So if you can, can we fix that?
Let me ask about that, because my understanding initially was, as with all things, we were being directed by the health department. So let me find out why there's that discrepancy, and I will.
Okay. I have the full document from AACPS and the health and the athletic.
Right.
And also I can see how there's a difference between return to indoor classroom perhaps versus return to outdoor playing a sport, you know?
I think an issue could be of the fact that like people on the team could be in hybrid and they're just super precautious because they want to prevent an outbreak. And sports are just so close contact, especially with games starting. They're
Yeah.
just trying to be hyper vigilant. It's not something to tell the health department that they're wrong. I think they've seen outbreaks in the private schools and just want to make sure that we don't do that or we're not responsible, because at the end of the day, like kids are still going back to school. So although your kid isn't,
Right.
it could be like, oh, well, the soccer team got it. Some of the soccer team people went to school and now you have this huge outbreak and you have contact tracing and all that. So that could be why they're making sure to go just with the 2 weeks, just to be precautionary.
I've also checked a couple of things, gotten some information here. This is actually health department guidance, but it's different for schools. So the health department has said to us, the negative test does not apply for schools. If it's in another setting, it does. And I think Kayla's right. I mean, I think part of it is just, you know, the closeness in certain settings that they're concerned about. But yeah, they do have a separate guidance for schools. So it is, we are following the health department in that respect. So, yeah. And Alderwoman Finlayson, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Joanna, for your report on your last meeting. And just another little tidbit about the George Fox renaming. That lawsuit was actually Thurgood Marshall represented Walter Mills, who filed the lawsuit against George Fox and the Board of Education. And that is considered one of the first lawsuits in the Brown versus the Board of Ed decision. So right here in Annapolis. So I'm very glad, and I've been keeping up with that with Tony Spencer and the other members. So thank you, and thank you guys. Congratulations on making that decision. I do have a question. What is the status of teacher testing right now? I know teachers were given the opportunity to go to Severna Park, I believe, to get their, not testing, but we've moved out of the testing phase, their vaccinations.
Yeah.
So where are we with teachers being vaccinated now?
Every teacher who requested a vaccine has received at least their first dose. A couple of weeks ago, we started second dosing. So now we're moving forward in that. So we should have, I believe the last first dose clinic was March 11th. So our last second doses should be somewhere around April 8th. So by then, anyone and everyone who requested through ACPS to get a vaccine will have had one. So we should be in good shape. We are receiving now all of the tests and the various other materials to have testing capability at the schools, because that is part of the guidance that has come down from the CDC, the Biden administration, and so forth, for moving forward to get schools open, is to make sure that we have testing capability. So if someone goes to school in the morning feeling great and 2 hours later spikes a fever or whatever, we have the capacity. So, you know, it's the school system, you know, we're now working with having hazardous waste and hazardous waste pickup and all of the things that go with that in the schools. But that is part of the procedure to get schools open and keep them open, is to have that. So in addition to the vaccinations, we have the testing. As you're all aware, the vaccination supply is about to open up to a much larger level. We're now going to have, thanks to our health department, the county executive, we're going to have, you know, at the Naval Academy Stadium, a massive site right here. And so, you know, we stand I think we're in good shape to really begin to get our 16-year-olds and up vaccinated, and we can all keep our fingers crossed that by the fall, younger children have the opportunity to be vaccinated as well. But yep, that's where we are. And the fire department have been incredible partners in the vaccination process. So Chief Walford has just, and her staff have just done an extraordinary job. And they have, among other things, especially when vaccines were really tight, they are so precise, the EMTs in their vaccine, they can overdraw. So, you know, we're getting 1,200 vaccinations out of about what is typically 1,000 dosage batch, which has made a huge difference in this environment. So thank you.
The city will begin weekly vaccinations at Pitt Moyer. Actually, next week we'll be doing it 2 days. So we will have, there will be opportunities for teachers to not have to travel, but in their own communities to get the vaccination. So please stay tuned.
Yes, excellent news. Thank you. Thank you. I think Jess has her hand up. Jess?
Yeah, I had a question as to whether there's been any, I know the question has been asked, but whether you've heard anything about pooled testing. I know in a lot of school systems where they have, you know, been able, I know there's a lot of people who want to open up 4 days or 5 days, but in schools where, particularly where they have high case rates like we still do. I mean, our case rates are lower than they were in January, but they're still higher than they were in October. And pooled testing where you go in, and Baltimore City's one, but there are plenty of others where you go in and you're testing for asymptomatic spread among students, which is, as we all know, really how children spread the virus, right? So you can say it didn't really get spread in the school, but we don't really know that because asymptomatic spread, we don't know. I think that a lot of us would feel a lot more comfortable, given the size of our school system, given the size of many of our schools, if pooled testing was there. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and whether that's something that the school system is looking into.
I haven't heard specific discussion about it thus far, but to be fair, we're in the early stages of just getting our hands on actually having our own capacity for testing. The possibility of testing came up a couple of months ago at this point. And at that time we were told, well, you just have to come up with the money for the staff and everything, which was, you know, simply a budget we didn't have. Because the federal guidance and everything else has changed and the money that came through from Congress, things have changed. So I suspect as we begin to actually get the testing capacity, this is a conversation we're going to have. I'm certainly going to bring it up because it's, you know, these are all the things we have to weigh to make sure that as many families as possible feel comfortable and safe. I mean, to Kirsten's comments earlier, comfortable and safe sending their kids back. And so I think it's certainly something I'm going to raise, but no, I have not heard specific discussion about it yet. And so, but I think it's certainly something we should examine and see if it's possible. So thank you for that.
Comments or questions for Joanna Tobin?
Janet, again?
Joanna, I was wondering, I later in the meeting, I'd like to make a motion for the commission to consider. But I hope you are aware of and working on the discrepancies in our cluster of the percentage of children that have gone back hybrid versus other wealthier clusters. I am very concerned that the quality of the virtual learning and the disruption of changes, if the school system proceeds to more hybrid days, to 4 hybrid days a week, that the huge number of virtual learners in our cluster will be left behind in this instance. And, you know, we are already the ones with greater needs, and should be considered by the school system, not just the ones with certain wants for hybrid. And if you read any of the comments on the, any of the teacher comments on certain websites, they will flat out tell you that they cannot do half as good a job when they're trying to keep track of their hybrid learners and their virtual learners.
Mhm.
People get shafted on that. So I'm going to be making a motion for that. The Annapolis Education Commission does not support going additional hybrid days during this school year.
Mhm.
But what can you tell us about that?
I mean, at this point, we're, as one principal I talked to recently said, we're trying to get the 2-day a week going, right? We're just trying to get
It just started.
this
Right.
started.
The other grades.
On the other hand, as everyone's aware, the CDC has now changed its guidance with regard to the 6 foot versus 3 foot. And so, that's, I mean, we have to look at that guidance and we have to weigh that. And we also have to weigh the fact, as we talked about before, that the pediatricians are putting a lot of pressure, not putting pressure. They're insisting that it's critical that kids get back in school as much as possible, as soon as possible. And all of these things.
The American Academy of Pediatrics has.
Yeah, they've been saying that for a while. I mean, they've said you always have to weigh these things, but if there's any possibility to get kids back, you need to get them back. And so
our cluster has chosen not to come back. So how do we represent the needs of our cluster?
Yeah,
right.
I just wanted to, because I've asked that information from Mr. Mosier and have not received it, but how many, I keep hearing that there's so many people on waiting lists, but every school that I've talked to in our cluster, there's no waiting list. So, where are,
well, I think what you're saying,
everybody, right? If
you're saying it's
wanting to go back.
No, you're saying it varies. And look, this isn't just true of our district. This is true across the country, that relatively speaking, it tends to be wealthier families who are more anxious to get their kids back in person in school for all the reasons that Kirsten talked about: lack of trust, concern about spread, concern about bringing things back into the home, families having to lose their breadwinner, all of the things that families are up against, and the inequities pile on the inequities. I mean, that's essentially what is happening here. And so I agree with you. I think from my perspective and my district, it's critical that virtual remain strong as possible, because that's how our children overwhelmingly are getting their education right now. And if what we do is to the detriment of virtual, that's, given that the majority of our students are in virtual, that's not acceptable. So those are the things we have to weigh. I mean, you're aware of the news, you see what's out there. We get a ton of emails. There are a lot of people who think we should have had everybody in 4 days a week a couple of months ago, and are really angry about this. And, but it's not our job to be swayed by those opinions. It's our job to make the best decision for the students who depend on us. And so
that's why I think it'd be important for the Annapolis Education Commission to go on record with a motion of support for our virtual learners to not be second class to the push or hybrid.
With the hybrid thing, from what my teachers have told me from being hybrid, is that they just think it's more sense to combine the cohorts because there's so little amount of people going in. So like for some of my classes, it's only me and another kid. So it just makes sense. I think what they're trying to say is just to combine the two so that we're getting that interaction with other kids. And a lot of my teachers say they enjoy it because they don't feel like they're talking to a blank screen in the sense. So it's better for their mental health, because a lot of kids don't turn on their cameras or choose to participate, because some kids with the virtual just log on and then they leave the computers. So yeah, we have a huge population on virtual, but the real question is how many of them are actually doing it? Because I know for other counties, their counties may be doing a lot of work with virtual, but less than 50% of the kids are actually doing their work or even showing up. I know Prince George's County has a huge number of people who just haven't shown up to virtual school at all this year. So I think when it comes to weighing that, we also have to weigh that option, because it's not like we're some private school where we have a bunch of kids going in cohort A and cohort B. We have a very few amount of students. So in my head, it does make sense just to combine them and let those who want to go in person, go in person.
And that makes sense administratively to combine the Monday, Tuesday, and the Thursday, Friday into one, 2-day cohort to make it more.
Yeah.
I know
And
that's what
some
they've done in
schools-
a lot of the elementary schools. That's
Yeah.
how it's worked out, and it works really well like that. They have 2 days in and then 3 days where everybody's
Yeah.
virtual, and it just is a better.
Okay, we have time for one more comment for Dr. Tobin or question.
Well, working as a substitute, like I said, like Kayla just said, I see students, they log on, but I may call them, call their name in the middle of the class and they don't respond. So I just think that, I don't know, they're logging on, but as far as paying attention to class, I'm not sure.
All right, Odessa, you got the last comment here. Dr. Tobin, thanks very much as always. And please feel free to stay if you like, or depart as your schedule requires. But we do appreciate your participation and the valuable role that you play in directing the voices of Annapolis parents over to the school board. Thanks very much. Okay, we're on to item number 6 on our agenda here tonight, which are committee updates. Any update from the charter school or target program?
Yes, I would like to say something. I watched a report on C-SPAN over the weekend, a company called McKinsey and Company, and it states that the pandemic has set back learning for all students, but especially for students of color. So, in the Annapolis area, we already had an opportunity and achievement gap problem with our students of color. I just think that, when school starts back up full time or whatever, I just would like to know how the Annapolis Education Commission or the school board is going to address this a lack of what's the word I'm trying to say? How are we going to try to make things even better for the students of color when we are already behind? So, and Monarch seems to be having a lot of serious problem. Maybe Laura can kind of like address that, but I heard that the principal has quit. The Phoenix Academy is going through a restructuring. I think they're on a 3-year plan because of their graduation rate. So that report says all students are going to be so far behind, but the students of color are faring worse. I sent a request to delegates Shanika Henson, Sarah Elfridge, and Dana Jones, asking them to get more information about the opportunity gap, especially for our children of color and African American males. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, how are we going to focus on an equitable education for an equitable future for our children? Because this pandemic, it's nationwide. I know everybody's falling behind, but Annapolis is already the cluster. The Annapolis cluster is already so far behind. How are we going to address this issue? This crisis. And as I said, the charter schools doesn't seem to be a popular choice. I was watching someone else on C-SPAN called Communities in School. I went to them to a workshop with them in Ohio a few years back. And we tried to do something like that here in the Annapolis area with the Communities in Schools program. But I just don't think that we have a structured plan that's going to really address the needs of these kids once school starts back up full time. So that's my question and my report. It's something for us to think about. What are we going to do for these students?
Joanna, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I did. So a couple of things. So what Ms. Ellis brings up is the topic of discussion locally and nationally, and has been for months. There's language around learning loss. A lot of educators, policymakers are pushing back against that language because it's a kind of deficit thinking. And the general thought is that what we need to be prepared to do is to meet students wherever they are when they come back. It's kind of differentiate, we hear about differentiated teaching. It's kind of differentiation on steroids is basically what we have to be able to do. And the key tool that has shown the best results is tutoring and one-on-one tutoring. And the good news is the money that is now coming through is for these kinds of things, right? Is to be able to have the resources to meet students where they are when they come back and re-engage if they haven't been engaging, all of those things. It is, however, a discussion we've got to have now about those resources being targeted. And it might be worthwhile for the commission to think about that, to really think about if you have thoughts of how you want to see those resources targeted. With regard to the questions also that Ms. Ellis raised about Black boys, there are, I think April 28th, the state board will be hearing the findings of a task force on equity in education for Black boys with a set of recommendations very specifically around that. It's being chaired by Dr. Vermel Green on the board. I was at a meeting where they presented to a number of the superintendents. I've seen the initial recommendations, but I think there's still some tweaking to be done before they're finalized. So this is something that the state board is very cognizant of and is paying attention to. I think as those recommendations, assuming they're voted through by the state board, then counties will have those recommendations before them. But this is a huge issue. I mean, the opportunity gap has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger through the pandemic. And we're very much aware of that. And that's one of our first jobs, quite frankly.
Can you address what's happening at Phoenix and Monarch?
Right now at Monarch, as far as I know, the principal is on a leave of absence, a health leave. So that's all I'm aware of.
Yeah, I've read somewhere where she left. She quit. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe Laura.
That's not a statement.
Odessa and Joanna, if I could jump in, I'd like to shy away from individual personnel issues.
Yeah, but that's what I'm aware of, that the principal is on family medical leave. And I'm sorry, Odessa, was there another question?
Well, that's okay. No, I was asking about Phoenix. I heard that they were under a restructuring program because of the graduation rate.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not familiar with the specifics on that. I can get back to you on that, but I'm not.
Okay.
Not aware.
But that information that you shared about this study or a committee that's coming up, can you put that into the chat or something? So, or I mean, well, I guess it's in the minutes.
It's not officially out yet. It will be at the April 28th state board meeting.
Okay.
And I will, once it is public, I will absolutely update you on it. So,
And we'll put
Okay.
that on the Annapolis PTSA Facebook page to
Yeah.
distribute to people. And
yeah.
also, can I ask you a quick question of, is the tutoring and the one-on-one that is needed to get people up to speed? The only thing I see as a problem with that is if it is after school hours, where we're expecting students to be online or interacting with more school hours, which I think
Right.
has been the weak link.
Yeah.
They can't be doing more school hours for things. So are they able to be pulled out or done during the day, or how's that tutoring?
Well, that is essentially what we're having to, we've had the evening hours and those kinds of things this year, which actually I've had a lot of positive feedback from families about.
From lower income families also?
Yeah. But this is now what has to be determined going forward is what it's all going to look like, because, we, as you're aware, we've the schedule's been changing all year at various, and, but, as if everything goes as we hope, the fall will look more like a normal school year. But the fact remains that we're going to have to figure out what the day is going to look like when you're talking about this amount of work that students are going to need to have, work being the work that the school system has to do to make sure that we're giving students what they need to get where they need to be. And that's still up for discussion. And that's up for discussion nationally. I've been chairing, I've spent 3 days evaluating a charter school network. They're trying to figure it out. Everybody is trying to figure this out, quite frankly.
Is there a possibility? Is there
Sorry,
a
go ahead.
possibility for Annapolis having a charter school?
I don't know where, that whole process is a matter of, bringing a proposal, the district making a decision. So, and it's also, in my view, the reason to have a charter school is to meet an unmet need. And so that's part of it, right? To determine what the unmet need is and make a case for it. So I don't think I'm not aware right now of any proposals being brought forward. I'm not aware of any group working on it in particular. I know there's a committee on this commission that's been interested in that. But again, I think the case has to be made very clearly that any charter school is meeting a need that's not being met. Because, I'll say this bluntly as somebody who's evaluated a lot of charter schools, chaired the board of a private school, and is now on the board of ed of obviously our system. Charter schools are a symptom of a problem usually. There's something that, things are not happening in the public schools that need to happen. That's generally where charter schools have come from to a large extent. And so I think it's important to attack the problem, but I'm not aware of a particular group bringing a proposal forward at this time.
Thank you.
Brianna, did you have your hand up? You're muted.
On this topic, I just wanted to highlight that some of you might have seen today, Education Secretary Cardona and President Biden announced the summer learning and enrichment collaborative. So the state will be getting a pretty large infusion of funding to specifically address kind of lost learning, like you were mentioning. And I think it's still to be seen how that will flow down to the county, but I think that the commission could be thinking about some ways that we want to advocate for how that funding will be used. And it is specifically to focus on student groups that are disproportionately affected by the pandemic.
Right.
So I think this is really a crucial lever that we might be able to tap into.
Yep. And we are, summer learning is absolutely on our radar. And so again, the commission, I think it's really important that you all think about, what you want us to be focused on. because it is crucial. So,
Jess, you patiently had
yeah.
your hand up. Please.
Sorry, I missed you, Jess.
No problem. It's fine. It's all on the same line. So obviously Eastport's a Title I school, and I can see on a daily basis the benefit that the small group pullouts have, for addressing specific concerns on all levels and for all groups, but particularly for our English language learners and our, kids that are falling in the opportunity gap. And I'm wondering, I know Title I stops at elementary school,
Right.
but I'm wondering where this maybe is the time, because as Janet was saying, the tutoring after school is great if you can get your kids to go to it, or if you have the opportunity to make your kids go to it.
Right.
I can't get my child to do
Right.
anything after. It's a very difficult battle.
Right.
And some people just don't have that. Their kids are working or whatever else.
Right.
But the small group pull out type things maybe this is the time where we really need to start looking, particularly at our schools where we have the largest opportunity gap, at whether we can do those pullouts in our middle schools and our high schools. So we're not just throwing everyone into one class and saying, catch up if you can and good luck and try to
Right.
meet me on office hours or at 4:00 tonight. But we're saying, you know what, you come with me, and, instead of all the money towards a new charter school, if we have money going towards reading resource teachers, math resource teachers at the middle and high school levels, like we do at Title I really think that might be, a more, and that also will, obviously we're all hoping that in the fall it'll be more back to normal, but there will still be some families, I think, that are going to want to be virtual. And that's something that can be done on any side, right? One of my
Right.
children has a reading issue, and he's, in small group pullouts with virtual and hybrid kids when the kids
Right.
are in the classroom, but it works because it's just one teacher and 3 children, right?
Right.
Or 4 children or whatever.
Right.
So I just would
Yeah.
like to advocate for that being something that you look into for our
Yeah.
cluster, because I think that is something very specific and individual that can help our children, particularly in our cluster.
I should say, and I think I mentioned this in an earlier meeting, when we voted on the budget that we're presenting now to the county executive, one thing that I put in was, by our standards, a small amount of money, $400,000 for literacy support, partially because the grant is sunsetting, partially because we know this is critical. And we've got to deploy, we've got to train more teachers and deploy more teachers who are really trained in teaching reading and literacy and working in these small group settings to provide these supports. And also because literacy, you have a window, right, where you really can work. And so if you lose a year, that's a big issue. So you've got to have those supports in place. And we're going to be the board will be doing a workshop before the end of the year on literacy, because, and I asked that of the president of the board, because I want to make sure the board is literacy is an issue near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time learning about it. Not everybody is as attuned to it. So I want to make sure that everybody on the board is kind of on the same page, understanding what the issues are, what the numbers are, how many students are going to need additional support, all of that. So
high school and middle schools do have literacy and extra
do.
help reading classes. So that is a thing that does happen. It's just that it's to get into it. It's just, you don't just sign up. Oftentimes it has to be so bad that the school puts you in it.
Right.
And a lot of kids also don't want to be in it because they're embarrassed.
Yeah, there's a stigma.
Yeah, so like sometimes I knew a kid who was in one, and they had a classroom that everyone knows the classroom that it's in, and they saw him and they made fun of him, and he didn't want to be in it after that. So they do have them. It's just kids don't.
Right. It definitely needs to be accessible to more so that it's not a concern. Like in elementary school, in a Title I elementary school, everybody's in their own different group. So it doesn't really.
Yeah, nobody's paying attention. Right.
You don't know whether you're in an ALPS group or a deficient.
And not to go down a long pedagogical rabbit hole, but the truth is at the middle and high school level, that's one of the great advantages of project-based learning and group work, right? You can sort of work it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't carry the stigma that Kayla is talking about. It's everybody's in a group doing something. And so it's, Alderwoman Finlayson, you've been waiting patiently, I think, with your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And my question was along the same line, so very appropriate. Did you all have a discussion during your budget deliberations about a reduction in class size and additional staffing? Because we know that those are the things that are going to truly make a difference and helping, especially eliminating any disparity in instruction.
We had to make a very tough choice in this particular budget deliberation. Unfortunately, between reducing class sizes on the schedule we would like and retaining institutional knowledge. And we have, as we all know, the blueprint is coming down the road. I'm a great supporter of the blueprint. I think the blueprint for Maryland, that is, I think it has all sorts of amazing opportunities, and I think it's a very enlightened understanding of what we need to do for education. It does, however, mean that we're going to have to meet in fairly short order a $60,000 a year starting salary for teachers.
And Ms. Finlayson, to go along with that, you have, in order to reduce class sizes, I know in my school, we already have a problem with teachers having classrooms to teach a class. So then you have to get money from the school and hope that the school, that the land that the school is on can afford an expansion to get more classrooms, because we have already used the plot of land for portables. We have that whole section by the pool is covered in portables. So then we would have to, we've already expanded on Annapolis once for the PVA wing, but yet we still have teachers, even in hybrid, who have to share classrooms, and you have to go through the sanitation process of that. So although reducing class sizes will help, could, and most likely will help education, there's so many more factors you have to look into doing that. And then when you expand upon the school, that also means you may have to remove the students because of all the construction. So where are all those students going to go?
Yeah, I mean, this is, so Kayla brings up some good points, but this is just to say, Alderwoman, we know that's one of the biggest issues we face, but we were also facing having to give back lost steps and so forth to our current teachers, because we want to make sure we retain good teachers. And we also know that coming out of this pandemic, for all the reasons we've just discussed around loss of learning and so forth, we need seasoned teachers in the classroom. That's not the time to start the new. So we reduced the request that the superintendent had made for 129 additional new teachers to 100. Use that money to pay for additional mental health support staff, which we also desperately need coming out of the pandemic, and took a very big swing to add a bunch of money to catch our teachers up on their lost steps and so forth, so we can retain our teachers. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have had to make those choices, but that was a choice that we made. So yes, it's a big issue.
My question in part was stemmed from your mention of the relief funding. And I was kind of hoping that maybe some of those dollars would be dedicated towards, that effort towards reducing class size.
So that's ultimately in the blueprint funding. But that part of the blueprint hasn't quite gotten to us. The federal funding, as you know, we have yet to understand how permanent any of this will be. We can't really use 1 or 2 year funding to hire people
Mhm.
because we can't then support those salaries going forward. So that's part of what we're trying to figure out right now, as is most of the country, you know, how that's going to be disseminated and what categories it's going to land in, so that we can support that, because we know we desperately need it. That is one of the single things we can do, you're right, to reduce the opportunity gap, is to have good teachers, well-trained teachers, and not too many kids in every classroom.
Can I ask one
And
quick question?
may I respond to Kayla very quickly? Kayla, we have gone through over the last many years, I won't even begin to say how many, issues with capacity. And you would be surprised how creative our school system can be when we need additional space. So,
Oh, I
and
know
that's-
they can. It's a lot of stuff that happens. I'm just saying, in order to see big permanent change, those are the steps that are unfortunately going to have to happen, because every year it's like a battle. Every year there's classes that they try and get under that capacity, and they figure out how to get some of them, but then you still have others that are just pushing the limit where there are no desks. So I do see that.
And it goes beyond one school. You know, it's a, you know, system-wide consideration. So.
Yeah, because when I was in middle school, Bates had an overpopulation, and in order to get rid of that, the school system moved those kids to Annapolis Middle, and then now Annapolis Middle has an overpopulation. So it's kind of just like a trade of students. I was part of that population that got moved, but because of my program, I stayed at the school that I was at. So I do know that they get very creative on how they do things.
Okay, Janet, you've got the last word here.
Thank you.
Very quick.
Jeff, can I ask one quick question? Oh, I'm sorry, Janet. I just want to ask one quick question. Can the Title I funds, does that go all the way from kindergarten to 5th grade, or is it just up to a certain grade, the Title I funds?
It's elementary, full elementary, I believe.
It's full elementary, because someone had told me it's only go up to 3rd grade. Okay, thank you.
It doesn't include pre-K though.
Janet.
Okay, quick question. Going off of what Brianna talked about, the summer enrichment grants, if you could put a bug in to AACPS, and we all can think about reinvigorating and restarting the Cat South summer camp possibility that many people, my kids had gone through. Cat South has some of the best video equipment in the entire county, sitting idle in the summer. When they stopped offering that summer camp. And I think that it was for like rising 7th, 8th, 9th graders. They gave exposure to that. And I really think we need that for more of our students. And so if they can run it multiple weeks, if they can do as much as they can to expose our students to those lucrative tracks of career fields. Thank you.
Great idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, folks. We just finished up item 6A on our agenda. Are there any other updates on committees other than transportation?
I just want to say the high school, there's a career path committee, whatever the title of that's called. Just that Ms. Hogan is continuing to post summer jobs and internships and opportunities to our Annapolis High School Facebook page, PTSA Facebook page. So look there for awesome information. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, this takes us down to item 6E then, transportation concerns and the walking radius limitations. And this is tied in as well as it typically is into school start time. So Laura, let me turn it over to you. Before you put forward your draft resolution, do you have anything else on the transportation side to bring forward?
Well, I think Joanna already covered the funding for the Prismatic report, which has to do with still school start times. So thank you very much. I'm glad to see that the Board of Ed is still, holding to their commitment with that and moving forward with that. But along with that, since they've hired Prismatic and Prismatic is going to come back and design routes, knowing our transportation department and knowing that they don't tend to like to touch routes once they have been developed, this is sort of our opportunity, I think, to get them, while Prismatic is dealing with the school start times, also having them address some of the other issues that we have seen. In the Opportunity Gap report that was presented to the Board of Ed a month or two ago, transportation was on their list as a priority recommendation, provide as something that represents a significant barrier to education. I know we've talked about it here at the Education Commission, kind of ad nauseum, how we see large numbers of our students, particularly those that do not have access to private transportation, when the school district has these large walking radiuses. In middle and upper class communities, that simply translates to parents buy the kid a nice bike, or the parents drive the kid to school and the kid shows up every day. In some of our communities, you're talking kids that have to walk 1.5 miles to the bus stop in the rain and maybe don't have another pair of shoes that they can change into when they get to school. So they're going to have to, if it's raining, they walk 1.5 miles to get on a bus to go to school, to sit there all day in wet shoes. And the kid says, I'm not going to do it, and so we see in our communities that these walking radiuses, and I know Jess has talked a lot about the unsafe walking routes, and how we've had people that have come and said that they've been trying to work to get city buses to take kids to school because the Anne Arundel County has not provided safe walking routes that are reasonable for small children to handle. And the school district has said, well, sorry, them's the rules. And we have families that are trying to then find city buses. I know in front of Annapolis Middle, we see lines of kids, that are waiting for the city bus to get on a bus to go home after school because the school system isn't providing busing, and these kids can't walk that far, or don't have 1.5 hours until they have to get home and look after a younger sibling or get to a job or something like that. So I think, long story short, I think what we need to do is make sure that that Anne Arundel County is taking all of these transportation issues into account, not just school start times when they are looking at them. We've talked about the fact that the consolidated bus stop structure that they use for our magnet programs basically prevents students from attending them unless they have private transportation to get them to a consolidated bus stop. I mean, it's all very well and good to say that a magnet program is accessible to everyone. Anyone can apply. But the reality of it is, if you're a kid whose parents don't have a car, or whose parent has to leave for work early in the morning, you can't get to the library, that's 4 miles away, to get on the consolidated bus to go to the magnet program. So there are so many transportation issues that I know Joanna's nodding, but I don't want to see them using the very narrow tunnel vision. We're only looking at replacing existing bus routes, existing bus stops with new bus stops that at slightly different times. I want them to look at transportation as a whole. So the resolution that I drafted, which was included in the minutes, which I can read to you, basically would take all of that. We're going to ask Anne Arundel County to take all of those issues into account, not just school start times. Sorry, a lot of words. Jeff, you're on mute.
There's a lot on the table here. Are there any other transportation issues before we move on to Jess's or to Laura's draft resolution that was transmitted electronically with the agenda? Jess.
Yes, I first of all wanted to thank Laura for joining the Transportation Committee, since it was lonely there by myself. So thank you for joining. I did. So Laura has brought up, definitely one of the biggest issues. And I was just going to show, if you live, for example, between Madison and Monroe Street, which is 1.5 miles from Annapolis Middle School, and you want to take and you don't want to walk to school for whatever reason, it's raining. Just really quickly, I wanted to share, you can't even do that with the city bus. Here is the city bus route. Here is Madison and President Street, and here is Annapolis Middle School. There's no way to efficiently, I mean, you can take it somewhere and then get on another bus and then get on another bus, but there's no way to efficiently get to Annapolis Middle School. There's no way to efficiently get to Annapolis High School if you miss your bus in the morning. See, there's no, Annapolis High School is what, way down here. And this is the bus stop. It's before Aris T. Allen, over by Festival at Riva. It's a major issue, right? Our bus stops, the lack of ability for our students to get there. There is a bus route in Eastport, and actually it affects most of the Annapolis Middle School cluster who chooses to go to Bates, that doesn't get them until Bates until bell time. So those children are, and what I think is, this is, obviously this has been an issue for some time. The Bates issue was something we brought up last year. It was not fixed. And I guess one of the things, for those of you who have seen, there's been a petition that's been put out asking for the Board of Ed to visit, to look at the leadership of the transportation department as a whole, because they've had a year where they've had to transport hardly anyone. And the bus routes are exactly the same as they were when we shut down a year ago. There's been no changes. There's been no changes to the times. There's been no, even though we're only transporting 11% of ours, and in Annapolis cluster, it's even smaller. It's a very small number. And so I guess, my question for Joanna, based off of, seeing this petition and everything is what is the Board of Ed doing about the lack of movement, the lack of change, or what, is anyone looking into what did the transportation department do over the last year? I'm seeing this petition, I'm seeing it signed by a lot of people in our cluster. And so, as an education commissioner, as the transportation chair, my question is the same thing. What has the transportation department done over the last year? We now have to spend $105,000 to bring Prismatic in, which is great because we want to get it done and that's important. But why, when we've had a year where transportation hasn't had to do barely anything, where is that? So I think that's a question that I have for Joanna. I fully support the motion that Laura wrote. It's a conversation that she and I have had quite often. And then I also I wanted to get a vote on, I sent the survey out now for the last couple months. Everyone should have had a chance to see that, and to make sure that there wasn't any opposition to putting the survey out to our cluster, asking for identification of any problem issues with walking, bus stops, etc., so that when Prismatic is doing their things, we can give that to them and say, look, these are the issues that our cluster has identified, because we are an urban cluster, and our walking routes, our things are different than they are in any suburban cluster. So I want to make sure that nobody has any opposition to me putting that out on the Education Commission Facebook page, and that we can get that information out to try to get the widest answer back on what our community needs in terms of safe transportation.
Okay, got it, Jess. So by a show of hands, does anyone have any opposition to Jess putting that survey out on the in the broader electronic community? Okay, there are no hands noted, Jess, so I think you've got the authority to go ahead and move forward.
Great,
So
thank you.
if there are no other transportation issues, Laura, I'd like for you to read out your resolution, please, before the group. We may not need any discussion since we've pretty much covered many of these issues here so far. So please,
Transportation's not a new issue.
Yeah.
All right. So the draft resolution is: the Annapolis Education Commission requests that, as bus routes are redesigned with regard to adjusting school start times, AACPS reconsiders the walking radius, safe walking routes, and other transportation issues which represent significant barriers to education, particularly as identified as a priority recommendation by the Joint Initiative to Eliminate the Opportunity Gap.
I second that motion.
Okay, the motion is seconded. For the sake of time, these are all issues here that we have repeatedly discussed, and the general thrust of our discussion over the previous years has been in support of that. I actually would like to call the question here right now, meaning let's take a vote as to whether we want to talk about it. A vote in favor of calling the question is let's proceed right to an immediate vote. A vote against it is to open up discussion. So this is only a vote here to discuss. If you want to move right to a vote, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not a quorum here. If you want to discuss, please raise your hand.
I guess, oh, no.
Okay, Ms. Odessa. So I think that the vote
I'm,
does
well, not, I'm with, I'm sorry, Jeff, but I'm with the majority.
You're the majority? Okay, could you
Yeah,
put up
yeah,
your
I'm with the
hand?
majority.
You are so easygoing, Odessa. We love you. Can you raise your
No.
hand if you want to proceed right to a vote here? One more time. We need 7.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That passes. Let's move right
Okay.
to a vote then on Laura's resolution. I'll read it one more time. The Annapolis Education Commission requests that as bus routes are redesigned with regard to adjusting school start times, AACPS reconsiders the walking radius, safe walking routes, and other transportation issues which represent significant barriers to education, particularly as identified as a priority recommendation by the Joint Initiative to Eliminate the Opportunity Gap. Okay, so the question's been called. We'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of that resolution, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that passes our minimum to proceed, or for it to be accepted. So that motion passes. Madam Secretary, anything you need additionally? Okay. Okay.
Jeff,
Yes.
may
please.
I ask that a copy be sent to Hillary?
Okay. Brianna, can you forward that along to her? And she does have a copy of that as part of the agenda. Okay, is there anything else on transportation or start times that we have not already covered? Okay, noting nothing then, we move on then.
Sorry.
Laura had her hand up.
I'm sorry, I'm so slow. I just
All right.
wanted to ask, just quickly ask Joanna, since you're here. Joanna, how much opportunity will the Board of Ed have to interact with Prismatic when they come in? Are these, if we send this resolution to you, is this something that you as a board can direct Prismatic to take into account as they are doing this work?
So I can, and you can distribute this to the entire board, and Dr. Arlotto. If you heard any of the discussion in the last board meeting, there is a sort of process once the contract is in play that they check, we get a point where we review it, but Prismatic is working with the staff. Okay, now we can make clear that we want to see certain things and we can ask a whole bunch of questions, but we're not in the position of, day-to-day working directly with Prismatic. They are there to work with the staff. They're being hired by Dr. Arlotto to do this. So we can review it and we can question it, but that's how that works.
Okay, last call for transportation issues. Okay, we proceed then to item number 7, old business. Does anyone have any old business for the betterment of the group?
Jeff, so just bringing up the issue of the grade schools rating for Annapolis High, Annapolis Middle, other schools within our cluster. I did raise this at the principal's coffee back in mid-March. And Mr. Delanis was not aware of that issue. So he was going to follow up with Mr. Mosier. I don't know what's been done yet. I also sent out to Enid and Brianna and you the contact information for the Navy's school liaison officer. And if you could distribute that to the rest of the committee so that we can keep those transitioning Navy families up to date on, so they don't just have to look at the websites that say we're a 3 out of 10 rating, that they can have accurate and up-to-date information for our school system. Thank you.
Joanna, please.
Yeah, the little update I have is Bob Mosier has continued to try to get somebody at great schools to respond. There's no phone call. He's been emailing. And then he finally got an email back saying, oh, the problem's been fixed, which it has not. So we're still working on that. However, Delegate Jones, I think, who was on this call last time, is very concerned about this. And I think we had a follow-up conversation, and I believe she also had a follow-up conversation with Mr. Mosier about it. I do think, honestly, that one of the best ways to begin to get at this, because it's kind of a systemic problem with great schools, right? That nobody can figure out what their algorithm is. Nobody can figure out what, how this stuff comes about. And there's clearly inaccurate information that we can't seem to get fixed. So I do think downrange, there may be an issue around regulatory stuff and sort of how they operate in the state, and we'll see what happens with that.
But in the interim, short term, working on what we can do.
Right.
Please encourage Mr. Mosier that he needs to coordinate with each of the principals in our class to take command
ownership,
of the data that they can provide.
Right.
Get that done, because that had not happened.
Right. Yeah, I will do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Janet. Any other old business? Jess?
Yes, we had asked at the last meeting for information about changes in attendance after the school start time shifts. I'm wondering if we were able to get that information.
Does anyone have any information on that?
I thought you were going to ask the school system for that, Jeff.
Jess, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the exact question?
I thought you were going to ask the school system for it's in the minutes also about changes in attendance after the school start time shifts. When we went from being the 8:30 a.m. starts to the 7:30 or 7.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I volunteered to do that, I dropped it. So let me get together with Joanna to Brianna and see what's in the minutes, and we'll see if we can route that forward.
I mean, I'm happy to reach out, but I thought that you said you wanted to be the main conduit between the commission and the school system. So I didn't want to overstep anything.
No, if you'd like to take that on, please, you have my blessings to do that. Any more old business? Okay, we move on to item number 8, then new business. Anyone have any new business for the betterment of the group? Janet?
So I have a motion I would like to make that I mentioned earlier regarding the stated intention of the superintendent to move to a 4-day-a-week hybrid. So if I can go ahead and read that motion. I'm making it on the fly. So I will welcome suggestions of improvements, but then follow up with the final motion. So my motion says the Annapolis Education Commission, considering the majority of learners in our Annapolis cluster who are virtually learning, does not support the superintendent and the Board of Education making additional changes to increase the number of hybrid days through the end of this school year. Period.
I would just amend except for students in the special centers, right? I think that one of the things that Dr. Arlotto had said was that special centers, because they're such small clusters, they were hoping to get to 4 days. But other than special centers, I don't think that we should be aiming for 4 days for anyone else.
Okay, I agree with that. And thank you for that important fix.
Also, the CAT centers as well.
Isn't CAT considered a special center?
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about, all right, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps that we could put wording in there for except certain groups, either students who need the students who qualify for additional services, like our ESOL learners, because I know originally, we were still pulling some of those into the buildings, even when the buildings were closed. So maybe we should word it that before they make any motion to get all students in 4 days a week, that effort be limited to students in special centers, CAT programs, or who require additional services.
Okay, I think that's valuable information. I just don't know how to reword that on the fly. So the motion would say something like the Annapolis Education Commission, comma, considering the majority of virtual learners in our Annapolis cluster, comma, urges the superintendent and the Board of Education to what word am I looking for here?
Stay with the 2-day-a-week hybrid format, except for students.
To remain with a 2-day-a-week hybrid format, except for students in special clusters, special programs.
Yeah, special centers, comma, CAT programs, comma, or who require special services.
Or who require special services.
So you can even say such as ESOL or, or intervention programs.
I'll just
wanted to get really specific about it.
This is just a notice of,
right,
volition. They know what special services covers. Right. It's nothing binding on them. It's just please consider this. All right. Are we good to go with that?
Madam Secretary, do we have an exact verbiage here of the resolution on the floor?
Possibly. So what I have is the Annapolis Education Commission, comma, considering the majority of virtual learners in our Annapolis cluster, comma, urges the superintendent and Board of Education to remain with the 2-day-a-week hybrid schedule, except for students who attend special centers, CAT programs, or who require additional services. Or
You're amazing. You're amazing, Brianna. Thank you.
Do we want to?
The thrust of what you're saying is to limit the number of back to school days to 2. Is that what you're driving at?
The thrust is, instead of making sweeping whole scale changes that every family in the entire system has to go through again, and to the detriment of our virtual learners by making our teachers hybrid 4 days a week, that we remain with the system and make it better, because it's not, it's not better right now. It needs continual work throughout the end of the year, and not making huge, enormous changes for our families who are already having transition changes.
Okay, so we got a resolution on the floor. The secretary has acknowledged that we have a verbatim transcript of what Ms. Norman suggested. Is there a second? Okay, there's a second. Discussion.
I saw Joanna's hand up first, I think. Jeff.
I was just going to throw into the conversation that I asked the superintendent about this very specifically at the last board meeting, and he stated there is no intent to send everybody back 4 days. It was about the students that we know, many of them special education students, ESOL students, who need to be back and who are in fact in small classes in some cases. So I appreciate the statement, but I think, that I asked the question on the dais and I got that answer. So just so everybody's clear on that.
But that doesn't seem to be how his op-ed was read by the majority of the community.
Oh, I know that's true,
Yeah.
but that's not what he
Or the
Yeah.
letter that was sent to parents after that board meeting, because then we got a letter, was it 2 days after the board meeting, that said that we were continuing to work with getting all students back 4 days
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah.
So there's,
You can't have it both ways.
I think
Yeah,
I think there is a disconnect in the verbiage of what the school system is
Right.
sending out. So that's why I do think that what Janet is
No.
saying is
No, and that's,
reasonable.
I'm not, I mean, obviously it's up to
Yeah,
the commission. I'm just saying I had that exchange.
That's a
Right.
good
We'd ask
reassurance.
you to
Yeah.
continue on that because I can tell you, being in a number of different groups, that there are plenty of parents who read what he sent out as, we will be back in 4 days within the next month, if not sooner. And we will have that opportunity. And there's a big push and we all know how things change. So I think that, I think we need to state this because it is really important for people to know that there's not everybody thinks that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, and that's why I raised the question when I did. So, but yes.
Thank you for asking.
India, please.
This is a bit wordsmithing, but just to have a bit more weight for our population in question, instead of saying considering, say in consideration of.
Yes. Yes, I agree that that's better.
Okay, you'll accept that as a friendly amendment, Brianna?
I would love
can
that
you-
friendly grammatical improvement.
Okay, that's been accepted by the purveyor of the resolution. We have that.
Yep, I've got that down.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
Just with regard to the virtual, could you reread that, the beginning of that again, Brianna? Sorry.
The Annapolis Education Commission, in consideration of the majority of virtual learners in our Annapolis cluster.
Could we rewrite that slightly, because it sounds like we're talking about the majority of the virtual learners instead of
In the
saying
majority of students
in consideration of the fact that the majority of students in the Annapolis cluster have remained virtual.
Who have remained virtual.
Or have chosen to remain virtual.
In consideration of the fact that the majority of students in our Annapolis
cluster have remained virtual.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
Janet, do you accept that change?
Yes, I do. Much
Okay.
better.
We're on discussion for the resolution that would effectively ask the school board not to expand the return to school greater than 2 days per week.
I actually have just a question about procedure and policy on the board, on the school system side. Joanne, I don't know if you can answer this. Is it possible that the school system could say, you know what, Severna Park cluster has a majority of people who want to go hybrid, but the Annapolis cluster has a majority that want to stay virtual? Would they ever consider doing something different in one cluster versus another cluster? Or is it just, we're going to do the same thing for all 85,000 students regardless?
For the most part, there's a whole host of problems that follow when you start differentiating.
Separate but unequal.
Clusters.
Separate but unequal education.
We're a big district with a lot of very different concerns. And we've had, while we were fully virtual, we had parents testifying who lived in areas where there were a tiny number of cases, and they said, open my schools, because we're fine. And it's like, no, we can't do that. First of all, people go back and forth, teachers go back and forth, all sorts of things happen, but there's just a whole bunch of issues that follow.
I'm not saying I wanted them to do that. I just wanted to know that.
Yeah, that's, so I think I'm saying no. That's.
Further discussion on Ms. Norman's resolution. Janet, I've got to speak up here.
Okay.
I certainly understand where you're going with this, but I have concerns about doing anything that's going to delay the return to the students to school. I do trust the administration here that they are trying their best, given all the different variables that they're trying to juggle, that they're trying to get the the students back into school. I don't want to do anything that's going to delay their timetable when they think it's ready to move forward. I think that the better place for the students is in the school and not at home. Virtual learning is not working in our house, and I'm not going to do anything that's going to delay that return. So that's just my opinion.
Sure, sure. And
Any other discussion?
I value your input. I would also direct people, if they want to get a teacher perspective of what a lot of the teachers are saying about the quality of the instruction that they're able to give. Those 2 days hybrid versus a 4-day hybrid versus 3-day virtual. This is where it's coming from, is that the teachers are telling us, you know, I can't do it, and I'm doing a much lousier job trying to be split this way. So based on teachers and the demographics of our district who have chosen to stay virtual and have been so overwhelmed, as you've heard from the Centro de Ayuda, are so overwhelmed by changes that have already occurred that I wish us to improve the situation we have already. All right, Laura, you have.
Laura Booth.
I want to say, Jeff, I totally understand your position on that. I guess my feeling on this is that it's an equity issue, because we have so many students and so many families, as we heard earlier, they're not comfortable returning right now. So they're going to stay virtual. So what happens if here in our cluster, we have a large number of students who remain virtual, and the school district says, we're back in business. We're going to focus on students in the classroom. I mean, all the messages that have come out to me basically sound like we want to push families back. I mean, like they keep saying, the language is always, we need to encourage more students to go into hybrid just right now. That is considered, from the school district point of view, is considered where people should be, and that the message that at least that I hear is that you shouldn't be remaining virtual. But as we have families that do remain virtual, I don't, and it is, since we see particularly it is our families who are most at risk, for all the reasons that we heard earlier. Those families are not comfortable going back to school, and those are our most at risk students. So for that reason, I think it is important that we ask the school system to keep virtual learners at the same, to maintain virtual learning is as important as maintaining the hybrid as it is to encourage kids to get back into the building, because those students are going to remain virtual. I don't see us at a point where the school system can say, we're open for everybody and you have to come back. Like, I just don't see that being possible. So I think that as long as we have students that are opting to remain virtual, we need to make sure that the school system is continuing to support them with the same level of effort and enthusiasm that they have since schools shut down last March. So I think that is sort of the meaning behind what Janet is getting at here. And I do support that. I think that is important.
I would agree. We're too close to the end of the school year. If we're going to we can't at this point say, okay, now we're going to switch again and you're going to switch to an all virtual teacher. It's too close. And for families who don't have health insurance, for families who have parents that work hourly and they don't have sick leave, and they don't have the opportunity to take the risk of sending their children back and having their children or themselves get sick, even if the risk is low, and they don't have the vaccination, they don't have the opportunity to get the vaccinations. We need to support those families. We don't need, we really need to focus on the families who lack the voice and who lack the ability and the resources that other families do not have.
Well, I think one drawback.
Can I
just say something? Yes, I think one drawback to the hybrid program was the start time. A lot of the kids, the students I talked to in the classroom, they didn't want to come back at 7:30 in the morning.
Yep.
And so it was easier for them to stay home and go online, and then instead of going, trying to get up early in the morning and catch the bus to school.
Right. Yeah. Particularly those families, those students whose families don't have the resources to transport them to school, and they rely on the school buses or public transportation, as we discussed earlier. So,
and I would also say, like, unlike the Severna Park cluster or others that are jammed with hybrid, in the Annapolis cluster, if you want to switch in now, there's room in our schools. People can talk to their principals one-on-one and say, hey, you know, my kid didn't sign up for a hybrid, but now really needs to go those 2 days. We've got the room and the flexibility to do that and give our students 2 days of hybrid if they so want to. There's plenty of bus capacity to transport them. There's plenty of school capacity.
And not at a detriment to the other students.
And not a detriment to the other students if we keep it at that 2 day a week system and just make it better each week. I mean, there's still so many issues.
Yeah. All right, I get it, guys. I still worry. The message that they're going to hear from the Annapolis Education Commission is we want to delay the return of the students to the school. And in my mind, the longer we keep the kids out of the school, the greater that gap between the high performers and low performers is going to be. I think that's the wrong path.
And maybe we need to
Well,
have
and
an
that's why-
amendment that offers some way of giving those families the security, whether it's through access to vaccines or access to health insurance. But given that we don't have that opportunity
Yeah.
within the Education Commission, we have to focus on education.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
that's why the motion does reference our majority of students who have chosen virtual learning. That, you know, I'm not saying delayed back to the classroom, but the majority of our students have chosen virtual learning for the rest of the school year.
Do we want to
All right.
add a sentence that says something at the end about that it is important to continue to support students in the virtual students in the virtual environment with, you know, full AACPS resources or some such like that? Just to make it clear that it's not that we're opposed to the idea, but that, you know we've got families who are going to stay virtual and they need to be supported. We can't be saying, okay, virtual learning is done, so we're going to, you know, ignore them and focus all of our attention on getting people back into the building. We need to continue to focus energy and resources on maintaining the virtual environment for those students.
Yeah. I think that is kind of stated as part of the first sentence in consideration of the number of students who have chosen virtual learning. So I don't.
Okay, we got a resolution on the floor then. Is there any other debate?
I will just say we all want school buildings to open up full time, but let's have the school system focus on the fall to get it right instead of at the end of this school year.
Yes, I agree, India. They've got plenty to do to get ready for fall. And the distraction of doing this new massive change is too much. They have transportation, they have so many other issues to take care of. I agree.
Janet, let me ask you, I mean, we got a number of private schools around here who've been doing this for over 6 months with a great degree of success.
And they're infecting our kids, Jeff. My kids are getting infected by private schools.
No, I mean, not even that. The private schools are mainly populated by families that have the resources. It's exactly what we're talking about. It's the equity issue. Those families have
the resources to be teleworking and not, you know, genetically vulnerable to the disease and not canned by their boss with no salary and all those other things.
And they have health insurance if they get sick, and they have sick hours, and they have all of the various things that, as the Central as she was saying, our other families don't have.
They transport their kids, they drive their kids to school rather than putting them on a bus where they're, you know, breathing in air from all the kids around them. All the kids in their bus are not in their cohort. So, I mean, every time a kid gets on a school bus, that's a whole bunch of cohorts that are really cross mingling. And I just want to say to Joanna, I cringe every time I hear Dr. Arlotto say with great certainty, we haven't had any transmissions in the school building. The only time he could actually say that is while the buildings were closed. The second that school opens up, I mean, my background's mathematics. Mathematically speaking, you cannot guarantee that all of those kids who are coming in contact with each other are not silently spreading, asymptomatically spreading that. I mean, the contact tracing only says, well, you were here where this person was positive. They can't prove that you got it from that person.
Unless we do pooled testing. If we do pooled testing.
But I mean, you can't really prove where a kid got it. I mean, if a kid gets sick, you can say he was in contact with, you know, he went to soccer and someone at soccer had it. So we're going to conclude that he got it at soccer, when really he could have gotten it from the asymptomatic student sitting next to him in class. But because that kid had no symptoms, there was no contact to trace, so it didn't show up. So I cringe every time I hear that, because it's really it's an untrue statement. We cannot say that.
Yes.
He is making a statement that is not provable, and sorry, that just gets me.
Okay. I think all the
like to
arguments
call.
have been out. Does anyone have any new arguments to bring to the floor here?
Let's call the question.
Okay, so let's proceed to a vote here. Let's go down the roll here. Brianna, back me up here. Ward 1, yay or nay for the resolution?
Nay.
Ward 2 is me, that's a no. Ward 3, Enid Collison-Lee,
Abstain.
abstain. Ward 4, Kayla Golder,
Can't
I
hear.
think she left.
did she leave? Okay.
Mhm.
Ward 5, India Oaks,
I can't vote yet.
okay.
Because she's not sworn in.
I heard I can't vote yet. Would you like for us to come back to you at the end of the roll call?
No, she's not sworn in yet.
Oh, that's correct.
correct.
Okay, India, I'm sorry. Ward 6 is not filled. Ward 7, Laura Booth.
I vote aye.
Okay, yes. Ward 8, Jess Packler.
I vote aye, yes.
Okay, yes. At-large A, Odessa Ellis.
Aye.
Okay, yes. At-large B, Grace Matthews, you have not yet been sworn in.
Exactly.
Okay. At-large C, Janet Norman.
Yes.
At-large D, Ken Starks is not here. Alderperson Finlayson.
Nay.
That's no. Okay, Madam Secretary, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. We need 7 to pass. The motion does not pass.
I thought we needed a majority we have a majority of we just need the.
Kevin would be unanimous. But how would that work?
Right.
Let me
I
see.
thought the
need to
motion
yield to
passes
the-
on a majority of,
Hillary, are you monitoring here?
I am. Yes, it should be the majority of the individuals voting this evening. I mean, of the individuals who are
present for the vote.
eligible to vote this
Are
evening.
eligible to vote. Okay, so we have 1, 2,
3, 4 yeses.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people eligible to vote. I had Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 7, Ward 8, at-large B, at-large C, and Alderperson Finlayson. Is that correct? 8? That's what I'm counting. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 yes votes, which is not a majority.
Right.
Madam Secretary, is that what you're counting as well?
Correct.
Okay. Is
So
anyone-
Hillary, it needs to be more than 50%.
Yeah, majority, yeah.
But how does that work with an
Half plus
abstention?
one.
Because it was 4 yeses, 3 noes, and an abstention. So it was a majority of yeses.
It's of the voting group, so it should be half plus 1. Is that correct, Sheila?
Mhm.
That's what I thought.
It's why on the board we have 8 voting members, but we have to have 5 votes to pass something.
Okay, so I am showing of 8 here voting. We had 4 yeses. The motion does not pass.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Let me see. We are on item 8, new business. Is there any additional new business for the betterment of the group?
That was new business.
Just a quick mention that Delegate Shanika Henson's scholarship, college tuition scholarship, college and career track has just opened, and that'll be put up on the Facebook page, and we'll send out to our members, but we could maybe send out to our list. we could send out to the list. I think the other two, I don't know if Senator Elfreth's and Delegate Jones's ones are still open, but we could circulate those. Thank you.
Any other new business? Well, I have one announcement here. This is college season here. We got word that Ms. Norman's son, Connor, recently accepted a full ride Air Force ROTC scholarship to the University of Michigan, one of the premier universities in all the country. So congratulations to Connor and to Janet.
Thank you. Go Blue, my alma mater.
Another kid off the family rolls here.
Yes.
Okay. Any, oh, by the way, from the membership here.
I would appreciate if anyone wants to talk to my 4 children about the benefits of a ROTC or academy education, please.
I will. I'll get one of them in, Jess. We turned down the Air Force Academy for ROTC. So there, and with Jeff's wise counsel, which I totally appreciate, and appreciate you talking to him at the game last night. So thank you.
Yeah, oh, he told you. Yeah, I would never get my teenager to tell me what was talked about at a soccer game, but I really enjoyed talking to him, and congratulations again. And
Thank
welcome
you.
again to Ms. India Oaks and Ms. Grace Matthews. We look forward to getting you sworn in here this coming week. So we'll see you at the next meeting, which is, as always, the 4th Wednesday of every month. And that will be Wednesday, the 28th of April at 6 p.m. Virtually. Okay, with that, thanks for everyone who is tuning in virtually. Thanks to our commissioners, and thanks to everyone for your interest in public education in Annapolis.
Thank you all.